Hello and welcome to this Unity first project setup and UI guide. To create a new Unity project, you want to click on New, and we will choose 2D for this class for the beginning, and create a project name. Let's call this test project, and then you want to choose a location. Be aware that Unity will create a new folder at this location with the name of the project. You will then have to wait a bit for Unity to set up the project. There is quite a bit of code to compile, libraries to create, packages to import, and that might take a bit. And here we are. This is a blank Unity 2D project. Let's start by looking at the different windows that we can see and get a basic overview of the UI. Let's start by the main window here in the middle. That is the scene view, which is the main editor area of your game scene. In here you can see all the objects that exist in your game. Currently we don't have much, it's just black. And we have a camera, which we can also see over here in the hierarchy, which is just a tree view of all of your objects. You can imagine a Unity scene as being sort of one level of your game, and as the game progresses from level to level, you would switch between different scenes. Once you have selected a game object in your scene, in this case we can only select the camera because we don't have anything else. On the right in the inspector, you can see a detailed view of what this game object is composed of. Typically in Unity, every object in your game, so like the player avatar, the enemies, the ground, and everything else would be represented by a game object, and then the game object's components tell it what it is supposed to do. For example, our camera already has a camera component attached to that has the camera settings, an audio listener to get audio output from it, and a transform component to tell the position, rotation, and scale in the world. The next view I want to show you is the game view. This is the actual game as the player would see it. And of course we don't have anything yet, so we just get the background color of our camera, which for example we can change here. And that is all that we have. So in order to see anything else, we would have to add some objects. To add any kind of objects, we would have to import what we call assets. Assets are any kind of images, sound, 3D models, textures, etc. Everything that your game needs to display or show or sound to the user. Assets are managed in the project window, which is down here. And there's a folder assets in there. And currently we only have a folder scenes, in which is the sample scene that is open here right now. The asset folder is actually located within the project folder on your disk. So if you right click here and say show in Explorer, or on Mac it would be reveal in Finder, you can see the folder of the project and then the asset folder inside it, and then there is a scenes folder now, the only one that we have in our assets at the moment. Alongside with any kind of imported folder or asset file, there is a meta file that Unity will generate, and this holds information on how the certain file or folder is being imported and managed in Unity. Let's go ahead and create something so our scene isn't all that empty. For this, you can either go to Game Object, to the object and sprite, or you just right click inside the hierarchy and say to the object sprite, and let's make a capsule. This is a new game object of type sprite. So when it's created, you can see that you can first give it a name, and then it has the transform component, which every game object has, and a sprite renderer component, which makes it a sprite. So this is what actually causes an image to show up here in the middle. A sprite is actually just the term that we use in this context to describe an image that's being displayed in 2D. You can change the image that's being displayed by modifying the sprite value of the sprite renderer component. Right now it uses the capsule default sprite, and if you wonder where that comes from, you can see here that by default Unity has a number of packages on the bottom left here imported, and this is from the 2D sprite package, which among a million other things contains a set of default images to use for sprites. So each of these default images here is just a file that Unity imported into your project from the get-go. You can look at those files if you right-click on them and then show in Explorer or reveal in Finder, respectively. And you can see it's just a file called circle.png that contains a white small circle. So if we take that circle and just drag it here into the sprite field of the sprite renderer, you can see now it displays the circle sprite. Now let's rearrange the windows a little bit so I can show you what's going to happen next. Just drag the game window and move it over here so we can see both the scene and the game simultaneously. And now if we take the capsule and move it around, you can see how if I move it outside of this white box in the scene view, we can't see it anymore in the game view. That is because this white box shows the area that the camera can see. You can set this area by changing the aspect ratio of the game view. So if I move the window here around, you can see how the area changes that we can see. You can fix it to a certain aspect ratio over here. For example, 16:9, that's the aspect ratio of most screens, and probably a good idea to keep this set to 16:9. The big arrow up here will start the in-engine test player, which is one of the best features of Unity. So you can test your game and play it while you're still in the engine without having to build it. And most of the time it also makes sense to check this maximize on play here, so your game will go full screen if you hit this button. And now you can see the game window maximizes and takes up as much space as possible, and here we can see our amazing circle. And you can just hit the button again to stop the execution. Now let's go through a couple of the modifier tools to work in your scene view. So I will move this a bit to the side so we have more space here. There is 5 different tools which are important to know, and they are on the top left side here. Currently we have the Rect tool selected, which is a great tool to work with 2D objects. With the mouse wheel or with 2 fingers on the trackpad you can zoom in a bit, and this Rect tool looks like that. So if I click on it I can move the object around, or I can scale it with these handles on the side. Also watch how the transform values here change if I do that. And if you click right here at the edge a bit outside, you can rotate. Observe how if I rotate, the Z value of the rotation in the transform changes. That is because we are in 2D and the x-axis is to the right, the y-axis is up and down, and the z-axis sort of comes out of the screen and goes into the screen, which is because Unity always works in 3D. So the 2D functionality basically just looks orthographically at the scene without any kind of depth, but we still do the math in 3D. So when we rotate, we would rotate around the z-axis. The other important tools are the hand tool, which is to move the scene view around. And then we have the move tool, which is like the Rect tool, but with arrows on the axis. So I can click on the separate arrows and move the object around, or here in the middle to move on both axes simultaneously. Then we have the rotate tool that does the rotation for us, and a scale tool to scale our object. These tools can also be accessed with QWERTY on your keyboard. So Q is the hand, W is the move, E is rotate, R is scale, and so forth. You can also right click to use the hand tool and grab, or Alt and left click does the same thing. As I said, Unity technically works in 3D, even though we are in 2D mode right now. And if you ever accidentally go into 3D mode, that is when you click this little button here in the scene view. You can see now I am in 3D, and there's our 2D sphere just as a flat sprite. We're not going to do anything in 3D here, so if you accidentally ever do this, just click on the 2D button here and then you go into the correct mode again. Now let's add a few more exciting game objects to our scene and actually see something happening here. For this we will use Unity's built-in physics system. First, let's take our capsule here and delete it. We're gonna make a new 2D object, sprite, and a circle. And to this circle, we're then gonna add a bit of physics. Right now, the object doesn't have any physics and any kind of collision. So first we should add some collision detection to it. We do that by adding a collider. Click on Add Component and then type in circle. And we want a circle collider 2D component. Now, if you disable the sprite renderer here, you can see that there's a green ring around the object, and that is this circle collider. So the sprite itself does not have any collision or any logic or anything else than just the display of a circle. To have other things happening with the object, we need to add more components to it. A collider itself, though, does not give the object anything but just the ability to collide, but it doesn't have any physics yet. So in order to have physics, we need to add a rigid body component. And we want to add the rigid body 2D. Don't accidentally use the normal rigid body, that is for 3D physics. We want the rigid body 2D. And now we have an object that has collision and physics. And with physics also comes gravity. You can see here that the rigid body has a gravity scale. This is currently set to 1, so it will accelerate downwards with the world gravity settings, which is standard set to 9.82, so the regular Earth gravity. So if I hit play, we can see how our circle falls down. Let's now add some ground so the circle can collide with something. For this, we will right click in hierarchy, select 2D object, sprites, and square. And then I press W to get the move tool, select my square and move the square somewhere here. Maybe at the bottom of what the camera can see. And then I press R for the scale tool and make it rather white. So we cover the ground, and then I add a box collider to it. So box collider 2D, and it automatically adjusts to the transform scale, so we don't have to mess with the collider width at all. Great, so now let's click play. And there goes the circle and now rests on the box. We can add a few more circles to make it more interesting. For this you can select a circle in the hierarchy and press Ctrl D to duplicate, and then W to move. We move that over here, duplicate, move over here, and now we can see the different circles all colliding with each other. We can now save our amazing physics simulation by hitting Ctrl S. If you have ever any unsaved progress, there's a little star behind the scene name here. So you'd never want the star to appear, so always press lots of Ctrl S and save. It definitely is a good idea whenever Unity crashes or something like unforeseen happens. You never want to lose any progress, so hit Control S all the time. The last thing I want to show you in this video is how to create a new scene. For this, you just go to File and say New Scene, and we're gonna select Basic 2D, and there we are. It's untitled right now, called Untitled, and it's not saved as a file. So in order to save it, we're gonna click Save As, and then in Scenes, and just, I don't know, call this Scene 1. And there you go, now you have a new scene. So this is all the basics on the Unity interface, how to make basic game objects, give them components, look at them in the inspector, in the hierarchy, manage your files in the project window, and the basics on the scene and the game window.